I've been out in Portland lately with the 24mm only, just trying to see what I can get with this wide angle lens in a city that's kind of a weird spot for street photography. You know, I've been challenging myself lately, and it's been feeling really good to kind of step out of my comfort zone and try new things, shoot in different places and all that. And you know, to be honest, I'm not too sure how advisable this plan really is. I usually find 24mm to be best when there are crowds of people, when I'm in kind of tight quarters, but not to spoil the whole video, if you're seeing this online on the internet, it does mean that I got a few shots that I liked over the last couple of days. So let's jump back to the laptop and take a look, talk about composition and light, framing, and how I got the results that I did with this lens. Okay, so now diving into some of the composition tips that I wanted to share with you all. This is the first image I want to talk about. Let's go ahead and pull it into Procreate just so I can show you guys kind of what I saw here and how I went about this composition. Okay, so this one turned out to be one of my absolute favorite shots from the day. It can be tricky using such a wide lens, especially with all of these different lines. Fortunately for me, none of these lines were really straight to begin with. Because these bridge supports are built at an angle, so there's not a lot of pressure to, you know, keep everything straight in an image, which, you know, can be tough to do with a wide angle lens. Also, some like kind of crookedness or Dutch angle can just add to the image too, but you can see these lines in the background I managed to keep relatively straight, these skyscrapers and things. So just watch for that. In my mind, the reason that this works so well is you have this little bit of motion blur that kind of accentuates the subject. You have this old sort of Godfather looking car rushing through the scene. That gives the viewer's eye somewhere to go, something to fixate on. But then in the background, instead of it just being a photo of a car, you've got this bridge, you know, this architecture. So you've got repetition here in these rectangles, which I thought was kind of cool, these three boxes almost in thirds. And then another thing I really liked about this composition is how this angle here mirrors this support up here. It just makes everything feel sort of framed and geometrically sound. Okay, this next image is a really important one in my mind for the conversation about wide-angle lenses in a quieter city like Portland. Sometimes it's not about having a whole bunch of subjects to choose from, but sometimes you just need one really good one. This scene didn't really even need a subject, but the subject just adds to it so much. I love, obviously, this shadow that he's cast. You can see the subject really small here, but then he occupies so much more of the scene in the shadow that the bike is casting. So I thought that was really cool, you know, and I think all of these triangles make for a really interesting composition. It just gives you these kind of pizza slice layers to look at, and then the subject sort of anchors the whole thing and of course keeps it in what I would consider to be the realm of street photography. Okay, let's talk about another one. Again, a really important example, I feel like, because I think a lot of folks look at 24mm or just wider lenses in general as kind of a tough thing to shoot people with, especially in street photography when you have to get really up close and personal. It can be confrontational. Pair that with the reality that we are in a city, again, like Portland, which is not, you know, this street photography mecca where you're just drowning in crazy, interesting subjects, and it becomes even more challenging. But again, just like how in the last example we talked about how sometimes it's not the quantity of subjects, but rather just, you know, the right person at the right time, I think that this photo exemplifies that. If I had to critique it a little bit, I would say that her feet are a little too close to the frame. I like a little more air, and I wish that this person in the background wasn't here. But we're going to talk about this as an imperfect example. The subject, of course, on the rule of thirds, which I've drawn very poorly here, but you can see she's roughly on the rule of thirds. Very basic composition. You have these leading lines kind of all tapering off into the distance. So I love a composition like this that makes the subject feel really larger than life, which is something that's easy to do with a wide-angle lens. Maybe not the best if you're a portrait photographer because it can distort people's features, make people's legs look super long, but I find that 24mm is a really good sweet spot between being wide enough to make a composition interesting and fit a lot in the scene, but not so wide that it just completely blows everything out of proportion and makes people look like aliens and so on. Okay, and here's another example of that. This is a super easy shot that you can get really anywhere. Most cities, regardless of their size, will have some kind of bridge. I talked about that a lot in my video about shooting tourist traps and making photos in places like that that are a little more interesting than just the standard iPhone snapshot that you see people come away with on vacation. Obviously, again, here you have this larger than life subject who's taking up a huge portion of the frame. I also use a slow shutter speed to get these kind of like almost speed lines, this blur effect. And then again, like the last photo, we have a lot of leading lines here that kind of bring the viewer's eye towards this vanishing point. So I like the juxtaposition of this cyclist moving really quickly, obviously because of the motion blur, and also this sort of point in the distance that seems far away. So it makes her look like maybe she's in a rush. It tells a story about commuting in a big city, whether it's New York or LA or somewhere smaller like Portland or wherever you might be. Now let's talk about one last example. This photo is almost just a photo of light. It's just evidence that you don't need, New York City skylines or anything like that to create an interesting composition in really any city or town or wherever you might be. Again, some vanishing lines off into the distance that pull the viewer's eye into this central point. And then I really, really like how the sun's rays just sort of dominate the scene and carry through. You can see these little sparkles here on the railing. You can see this little bit of lens flare here, some ghosting and things. All that pretty standard for a 24mm lens. If you have a huge lens flare like that, you can get all these kind of cool artifacts. I like playing with this kind of stuff. You don't need the fanciest city, you don't need the fanciest equipment. Sometimes an interesting focal length and some decent light, that's all you need. It's easy. Okay, cool. That's it. That's all the photos I wanted to go through today. If you have any questions about composing with a wider focal length like 24mm, especially in a quieter city like Portland or maybe even a small town, feel free to drop those below. And if you have tips of your own, share those too. I always like learning from you guys just as much as I like yapping about my own photos. So please share. Please don't hesitate to make the comments a lively discussion, pass on your knowledge and help each other out. And let's all learn from each other. Thank you as always for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, of course, if you haven't already. And without any further ado, I will see you very soon in the next one.